had a lot of fun following NPCs in Red Dead Redemption 2, and at commentary request, I decided to test it out in the Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered. I followed 2 separate NPCs for 24 hours each. Here's what happened. I encountered Heinrich in the morning as I explored the city of Anvil. He immediately stood out to me because he kind of looks like a Disney villain. The facial hair, the intense eyebrows. So naturally, I decided to follow him to see if he would get up to any Disney villain adjacent activities. I was thinking nefarious activities involving treasure or plotting against princesses. I don't know, something like that. Instead, Heinrich led me to the docks, where he and another male NPC paused in front of a shop and stayed there for hours. I'm not kidding, it was the majority of their day. As the sun climbed higher and higher in the sky, they stood planted in this spot. Other NPCs passed them with very little concern, which led me to create the headcanon that this must be something that they do regularly. Maybe they work as performers who pose as statues. No one was tipping them though, so I guess I must have been the only person who was really invested in their performance or in whatever they were doing. As the sun started to set, I decided to test them. It had been too long. I walked up and I stood very close to Heinrich's face, searching for signs of something.
Hi! What's going on with you? There are rumors that the Nords are attempting to capture the whole of Solstheim.
And then he finally started talking to the other male, who turned around to engage in a political conversation with him. And weirdly, I think they had the same voice, or maybe very similar voices. But finally, Heinrich was moving and he was doing things and he was interacting with other NPCs, so I just really didn't want to dwell on it. I followed Heinrich through Anvil city streets. He was in absolutely no hurry, even though he was standing nearly the entire day, didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't use the bathroom, nap, anything like that. He seemed to not have a care in the world as he was walking along, just sort of in his own world. Heinrich made his way to Castle Anvil, where he continued through the corridors of the castle until he entered the dining hall, where he sat with a few other individuals. Interestingly, he didn't socialize at all, and no one was sitting next to him, which suggested to me that he maybe is not well liked, so I'll add a point there for him possibly being a villain. He was served a piece of bread and blackberries and sat, raising his hand to his mouth, even though no food disappeared from his plate. Heinrich then suddenly stood up and left the room, leaving behind a full plate. That also seemed rude, so maybe he's rude, not evil. I followed Heinrich back through the castle gate and down the same streets he had just passed through to go to the castle. It was now midnight. He passed by a large house, walked around the corner, and then around the back of the house, which he entered and disappeared into. It turns out that this house is his. It's a very large house. Clearly, Heinrich is wealthy. I don't know how he is wealthy. I'm not sure what his story is. Based on the fact that he sort of just stood at the docks all day and didn't do anything, maybe it's money that he inherited. That's my headcanon explanation for this. Unfortunately, I was unable to enter his home without breaking into it, and I didn't want to risk committing a crime and exposing my experiments and throwing things off, so I elected to wait outside for Heinrich to exit. As the stars passed overhead, Heinrich remained indoors with no indication of movement. Between about 7:30 a.m. and 8 a.m., I observed movement again at the back door of Heinrich's residence. He and another NPC were leaving from the rear of the building. Why they don't use the front door that connects directly to the street, I'm not sure. Heinrich followed the main street that I initially encountered him on, likely returning to the dock where he will stand for hours and then briefly interact with his friend. Unfortunately, after my 24-hour experiment, I did not have a lot of clarity about whether Heinrich is a Disney villain or not, or even who he actually is and what he does. What I think is most likely, at least from what I saw, is that he just doesn't have very much to do with his time. And so I decided that surely there must be NPCs in Oblivion that are a bit more active than him. that don't just stand in the same spot for the majority of a day. And I decided I would move my experiment to another city, where I met my second NPC. I traveled to Bravel and almost immediately encountered my second subject, named Wretched Aya. To be honest, the reason that I followed her is that her voice completely jump scared me as soon as I entered through the main gate because she was talking to a guard at the same time. When I got a closer look at her, I observed that her eyes were just bugging out of her head, making her always look slightly shocked. I encountered her right about 8 a.m., which gave me the perfect opportunity to follow her through her day. I just stood around near the main gate, shifting position occasionally and staring straight ahead at all times, blinking rather slowly. She interacted with one or two other NPCs, asking them for money and continuing to stand at this gate area. I started to wonder if her presence here was because she had taken it upon herself to welcome people to Bravo, but she eventually walked away and followed the dirt streets past businesses and homes until she encountered another NPC who she spoke with about murder and politics. This conversation seems to have shocked Aya as she shrieked very loudly before almost immediately recovering and just saying goodbye to her friend.
No! Of course. Good day.
It didn't exactly feel like a natural conversation that would occur, but hey, you never know. After this upsetting conversation, or maybe not upsetting conversation, it's hard to tell, Aya continued her walk, now crossing a bridge just before 11 a.m. She approached a large statue and stood away from it for an extended period of time, wandering around in front of it and again staring straight ahead. Thoughtful and reflective, Aya stood very still with no indication as to her intentions or her thought process. She finally broke from her thoughts and went back across the bridge, now moving to stand in thought at the side of a different large building. With the time being almost 2:30 p.m., that indicated that she had been standing for several hours straight and she showed no signs of stopping. As the sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky, around 6 p.m., Aya began a new walk back in the direction of the front gate where I first encountered her. She walked through a bush along the side of a building and apparently accessed something from a bag located in the back. I saw her bend over to sort of touch it or come close to touching it. She then walked back along the streets, across the bridge, and to a bench located near the statue that she had spent so much time standing by earlier in the day. Here she sat and ate what appeared to be a piece of bread. She did this very slowly and methodically, using one hand to eat one bite at a time while the other hand held the food. She ate like this for a while until it was nearly dark outside. She stood, crossed the bridge again, and began walking back towards the front gate area and the location where she had accessed the bag. I assumed that she was going back there to sleep as it was getting to be late at night. It was around 8:45 p.m. But instead of sleeping, Aya stood thoughtfully and stared at the brick wall and plant life that was located near the bag that she had accessed and also a bedroll. There were NPCs that were chatting nearby, but Aya did not break focus. Again, she stood for about an hour plus. At about 10 p.m., she suddenly broke her focus and left the wall, the bag, and the bedroll behind. Now this confused me because I assumed that her bed was the bedroll that was near the bag that she had accessed by this wall that she had been staring at, but she actually went back past the shops and businesses and across the bridge again to a bedroll not too far from the statue that she had stood at earlier in the day and the bench that she had eaten at. This is where she finally laid down and went to sleep, and she didn't move at all throughout the night. Although while she was sleeping, it kind of looked like her face and mouth were moving, not to mention her arm just totally went through the bedroll, but otherwise, it looked like a relatively normal night's sleep that you would expect from an NPC. Aya woke up at 6 a.m. just as the sun was starting to rise and walked back to the main gate area where she returned to standing and occasionally interacting with other NPCs as she had been when I first encountered her. Now, there are some clear differences in the routines of Heinrich and Aya. Heinrich stayed in his home overnight, he ate at a dining hall with other NPCs present, and he didn't appear to have a job or any sort of activity that occupied his time during the day, unless you count standing and blinking very slowly. On the other hand, Aya slept on a bedroll outside, spending her day interacting more frequently with other NPCs and asking them for money. But what these two had in common are the hours upon hours that they spent standing and staring. And to be honest, it's something I have to admit that I admire, because standing for that long, their calves have to be absolutely ripped. So that's something that I took from this experience. What are your thoughts? Do you have any explanations or backstories, headcanons as to why these characters might have been doing what they're doing? Let's talk about it in the comments. This was a really fun experiment. I appreciate the request for this specific game. So if there's other games that you'd like me to do this experiment in, please let me know. If you like more content like this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.